Practicing cosmetology, aesthetics, or nail technology in Kentucky is not an inherent right. Engaging in these services for consideration requires formal, state-issued permission. The government exercises this control through its police power, the authority to regulate behavior strictly to protect public health and safety. The United States Supreme Court elevates this permission beyond a simple certificate, defining it as a protected interest. Once granted, a professional license is classified legally as a vested property interest, or a liberty interest, tied to an individual's livelihood. This property interest is shielded by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. Because of this constitutional protection, the state cannot arbitrarily revoke or suspend a practitioner's license without adhering to fair procedures and notice. This creates a continuous tension between the government's mandate to protect the public and the individual practitioner's right to pursue their chosen vocation. Managing the beauty industry, therefore, requires a rigid legal architecture that imposes necessary safety standards while guaranteeing procedural fairness. Industry regulation operates on a strict three-tiered legal hierarchy. The top tier consists of the Kentucky Revised Statutes, specifically Chapter 317A. These laws are enacted by the General Assembly to set the broad mission of public protection. The middle tier holds the administrative regulations found in Title 201, Chapter 12. These are promulgated by the Board of Cosmetology to implement the legislature's broad goals. While the statute broadly dictates that beauty schools must be licensed, the regulations provide the granular rules, like exact sanitation metrics and required training hours. The bottom tier is administrative adjudication under Chapter 13B, which dictates how hearings and disciplinary actions are conducted. A critical legal concept governs this entire structure: ultra vires, or an unauthorized action. If the board promulgates a specific rule that exceeds the broad statutory mandate given to it by the General Assembly, that rule is considered ultra vires and is legally void. Every single daily sanitation rule traces its legal authority directly back to this specific legislative pyramid. Rigorous state-mandated education serves as the first line of defense for public health. This chart breaks down the 1,500 hours required for a standard cosmetology license. It splits into a 375-hour block for theory and science and a 1,085-hour block of clinical practice. For an esthetician, the requirement is 750 hours. The state scales these educational requirements proportionally to the chemical and physical risks involved in the specific license type. Because the state requires every single hour of this training to be verified for licensure, institutions like the Louisville Beauty Academy treat documentation as a professional competency. Students use strict biometric fingerprint tracking systems as a legal mechanism to verify their actual presence and log their exact training hours. Once a professional is licensed, the state ensures ongoing public safety through mandatory unannounced biannual salon inspections. Licensees must prominently display their license, complete with a current 2x2 passport photo, alongside the facility's latest inspection report. Inspectors enforce strict physical prohibitions, such as the total ban on metal callus graters due to the severe risk of deep-seated infection. They also mandate chemical safety, requiring that all salon products remain strictly in their original, factory-labeled containers, so hazard information is always available. Routine sanitation and daily record-keeping function as the legal evidence required to maintain one's constitutional property right to work. This flowchart maps the disciplinary life cycle, which is triggered only by a formal, signed, written complaint, never by anonymous allegations. Once a complaint is received, the licensee has exactly 30 calendar days to formally submit a written response before the board takes further action. From there, the process can fork into two distinct paths: an informal resolution, known as an agreed order, or a formal hearing. An agreed order is an informal written settlement between the board and the licensee, designed to quickly resolve a dispute without a trial. However, signing an agreed order is a binding, final agency action. It permanently waives the practitioner's right to any future hearings or appeals regarding those allegations. The alternative path is the formal administrative hearing, governed by Chapter 13B of the Kentucky Revised Statutes. This hearing is a strictly adversarial process. It is presided over by a neutral, third-party hearing officer who is entirely detached from the board's investigators. In this setting, the board carries the burden of proof. They must demonstrate by a preponderance of the evidence that a violation actually occurred. The disciplinary process is an unforgiving machine. Signing an agreed order without understanding this procedural legal machinery can permanently compromise a professional's livelihood. Historically, Kentucky courts applied a standard of agency deference. When industry rules were ambiguous, judges automatically deferred to the Board of Cosmetology's interpretation. In 2024, the passage of Kentucky Senate Bill 84 ended that automatic regulatory dominance. Senate Bill 84 mandates a new standard of review, called de novo, aligning state law with national shifts in administrative power. De novo review requires the judicial branch to examine the law with a fresh eye, offering zero presumption that the regulatory board's interpretation is correct. Now, courts must legally resolve any ambiguous statutory questions against a finding of increased agency authority. This serves as a structural check against regulatory overreach, restoring the balance of power between the individual licensee and the state. In light of this shift, institutions like the Louisville Beauty Academy emphasize that legal literacy is no longer optional for students. It is a required core competency. A well-educated licensee who understands the boundaries of the law is the single most effective safeguard for public health. Professionalism in this industry integrates technical skill with strict legal compliance, demanding constant vigilance over one's procedural rights.